It is your PrisonPlanet.tv memberships that fund so much of what we do here in this operation. And then we're more than happy for the TV show after it's aired live, then be leaked out onto the web to tens of millions of people. That's our goal.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Thursday, February 7th. I'm not Alex. I'm Aaron Dykes. We're sitting in today. Alex is taking a well-deserved rest, spending some family time, I hope. We're going to bring you a lot of important news today. We've got several of our reporters joining us, so we're going to have them bringing forth the most important news. David Knight's going to join us. We're going to cover drones and a whole lot more. Jakari Jackson, David Ortiz, Melissa Melton, they're all coming up, but we are at an important juncture in history. The authoritarians, the repugnants to the Constitution are completely taking over the levers of power, but they're losing credibility very fast. This Second Amendment battle has been a great moral victory for gun owners everywhere, but we need to hold our ground even more, push forward, and win back the cultural war. That, of course, is what the Infowars is all about. And we're making significant grounds there. The world's changing around us. You've seen the vast GMO battle that happened last year, largely centered around Proposition 37 in California, which was officially lost. But just like many of the battles in the American Revolution, losing isn't always really losing, because it was a significant threat to the establishment that's trying to force us to eat unlabeled foods, lots of dangerous stuff in there. And now they're proposing a federal compromise on GMO labeling that might trump state law forever. And surprise, surprise, the big big food industry is behind quite a bit of it. Supermarkets cry foul as FDA proposes new food labeling under Obama. Will federal compromise on GMO labeling trump state law forever? GMO giant Monsanto joins Big Business Coalition for UN Agenda 21. And from Anthony Jakari over at Natural Society, safety group blows lid on secret virus hidden in GMO crops. We'll get to that later in the program. But these two headlines tell a story on the Second Amendment battle. Well, maybe three headlines here. DHS purchases 21.6 million more rounds of ammunition to go along with their more than 1.6 billion rounds. You've got to imagine they're preparing for something. Of course, the entire Department of Homeland Security was crafted, designed, put in place before 9/11, but they used that crisis in a very Rahm Emanuel sense. They used that crisis, rode on the backs of tragedy, all the tears, everyone's hurt, to push through a completely unconstitutional system that we're still living under and that we've got to expose and roll back so we can put back in place our republic, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. But while they're purchasing more ammunition to occupy America, unprecedented demand. Americans purchase a gun every 1.5 seconds. And an 86-year-old woman grabs gun in self-defense, and she was able to stave off a home robber. And that's what the Second Amendment's for. You would really hope an 86-year-old woman would never have to come to arms, but if no one else is there to protect her, and surely the police can't do it, you would rather she is able to defend herself than let the criminals go wild. Yesterday, last night on the nightly news, I covered Luke Radowski's story there in New York City, where there's a total citizen disarmament, where you're not allowed not only to have concealed weapons, but you're not allowed to carry knives or really even defend yourself. And he tells the poignant story of a man, his name is Joe Lozito, who was attacked at knife point on a subway and nearly died, but he was able to overcome his assailant. And yet there were police, armed police, on that train no more than 2 feet away from him through a door, and they refused cowardly to come through and save him because they believe the assailant might have a gun. Well, they have guns, yet they wouldn't respond because they say they have no duty to protect and serve. Well, number one, we want to encourage law enforcement and military to indeed protect and serve. And among the protections is not only the people, but the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Look, we've got to reawaken this country. We've got to go back to liberty, self-defense, common sense, people. We'll talk about it more on the other side. A lot of hot news today. Stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of special guests and reporters back on the other side. Infowars.com. We're back at Infowars.com. Now, that song in the background is about selling your soul to the company store. What's that all about? It's about liberty as this complex struggle where even when you're free in name, we had a lot of indentured servants in this country, of course, slavery. Even once they became free, were they really free? Because they had to work on these fields owned by the company store. They had to buy their products at the company store. They had to take out debt there, and really they could never get free except in their own souls. But if we awaken our minds, if we understand what we're fighting for and why we want our rights in place, we can start to take it back. The Bill of Rights is, in my view, the most promising aspect of the American Revolution. I touched on this last night. I try to touch on it all the time because that is the real whole, that's the whole product of the entire Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, the Awakening, the battle against kings and princes and tyrannical religious authorities to say that I'm going to have my relationship with God on a one-on-one basis, but here on earth, you're going to respect my rights, keep your distance. We're going to create a buffer zone. We're going to separate powers because all you people in power are corrupt. It always happens time and again. So here we are once again at the best of times, the worst of times. We've got John Brennan on Capitol Hill today seeking CIA confirmation. And this is, of course, the man who is one of Obama's top advisors and the one considered responsible for these kill lists, these drone strike lists, where they just send over this automated thing, take out a suspected target and plenty of collateral damage in between. They don't care if they kill women, children, completely innocent people, as long as they can claim they might have possibly been targeting someone who might be associated with Al-Qaeda. Now he's going to lead the already flawed CIA and bring no moral ground to it whatsoever as we continue to deteriorate here. Meanwhile, you've got states like Texas introducing anti-drone legislation. Texas anti-drone laws would be the toughest in the USA. They are, of course, considering that legislation here in the state capitol, and they already considered banning the TSA and bringing in private security at the airports here. In fact, it passed overwhelmingly in the House, and they used procedural moves to block it. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, behind the curtain, they made extortion-like threats, threatening to have a blockade on Texas, a no-fly zone, and basically occupy the country federally if they dared to say no to a clearly unconstitutional TSA. Is it going to be the same with drones? We can see how they would violate our Fourth Amendment, see how they would violate our privacy, see how they would circumvent due process that's put into place so that criminals are dealt with under the law, but that there's proper procedure there. You have people who are suspicious. You have evidence. You have reasons to go investigate. You just don't go from place to place spying so you can collect revenue and round up people and get people in the system and make a bigger collectivist government, raise up the coffers. And we saw that too with Kurt Nimmo's story from yesterday about how they're going to do checkpoints in Florida now, not just for DUI, not just to see if you might have been drinking, if you might be a safety hazard out on the highways, but to see if your tires are too worn, to see if your registration sticker's in place, to see if your lights are working, see if they can give you a ticket and raise some money for the state and just harass you a little bit when you've got a freedom to travel. You've got your rights, and that's what we're fighting for in so many respects. And so there's just news all over the place on that front. Now, we're going to get way into the drone issue after the bottom of the hour. David Knight's going to join us to bring us up to speed on some of the latest. But you heard the headline in the past couple days. Department of Justice Eric Holder telling us that it's, quote, legal to drone strike Americans. Of course, in this context, they're implying that they mean Al-Qaeda Americans living abroad, and just because they're born here doesn't mean we can't take them out by drone strike without due process. Well, that's fine and good, and they've been doing all kinds of things like that under the war on terror. Of course, I don't think it's fine. I think it's shameful the way we're prosecuting this empire and really just rack and ruining other countries. But the point is, they're trying to legitimize, well, it's this Al-Qaeda guy, so why do we want to bother with putting him on trial? It's Anwar al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old son, and we'll take him out with the drone if we want. But think about it. Here they are building up drones here inside the United States, at least 30,000 plus drones being deployed by law enforcement in different areas of the country. The feds using it to spy, the EPA using it to spy on farms. They've deployed planes to supposedly monitor pollution and check for terrorism and just see if anyone has an unauthorized something on land somewhere that the feds may not already control. We've got to start saying no to this, and it is encouraging, whatever comes of it, that many of these states are beginning to try, at least in name, to restrict drones. But you've got things like Florida police want to use drones for crowd control. That's more of the stuff we've already seen on that front. We'll get more into it, but they're setting the stage for legitimizing not only killing foreign Americans abroad who might be Al-Qaeda, but for using drones, of course, domestically on possibly suspected domestic terrorists, extremist Americans. Political dissidents is, of course, what it really boils down to. And you've got some really wicked and corrupt people for a long time, for many decades in Washington, but they're just getting worse and worse. They're getting that feedback loop of no one's going to stop them. No one's going to say no. They've got the controls of levers. They bought out all the elections and politics. And so no wonder you've got people like Jesse Jackson Jr. from one of the many oligarchical dynastical families possibly facing jail time because of his many corruptions as a member of the House. That's just one of many headlines here. And just interesting, the stuff that's going on. Let me reset here. There's a lot of interesting China news, and this isn't really my specialty. I've probably got a lot of ignorance with China, but you can see there's people clearly fighting for freedom there under a very authoritarian regime. We covered yesterday a wholly disgusting story. I mean, already the entire one-child policy, the encouragement of abortion and infanticide and looking the other way as children are sold into sex slavery and child trafficking, and really just devaluing humans, especially little girls in China. But even more disgusting, just that kind of cherry on top of the icing that was already on that authoritarian cake, is this horrible case of the one-child policy enforcer, these family planning officers who crushed a 13-year-old boy to death because their parents had more than one child and refused to pay the fine. And that fine is a big payoff to the system. It's financially burdensome for a lot of struggling Chinese people. And, of course, children who are born outside of the one-child policy, many of them never are allowed to officially be recognized in the system. They, in many ways, don't have rights or benefits. They can't get inside of different healthcare systems, and they pretty much have to live outside of the books. It's a real tax. But you've got things like in Hong Kong, which is not China proper, of course, poor people in cages are having to pay rent to rent $167 a month for about a dozen. The 67-year-old former butcher in Hong Kong pays 1,300 Hong Kong dollars, about $167 a month, for a dozen wire mesh cages resembling rabbit hutches that apparently people are living in this dilapidated town. Meanwhile, in Guangzhou, a Yangji village in China, I don't really know the area to be honest, moats have been dug around a Chinese villager's house to drive them out. They're pretty much taking over all these zones and handing them over to corporations, the kind of stuff we've long seen in America and the Western world. And they're dealing with holdouts. Most of the people sell without any resistance, but there have been many cases of resistors in these villages, and they've dug a moat to basically commit siege against these villagers and force them to sell or basically starve. And just a lot of disturbing news there. You remember the case last year where the man wouldn't sell his property to the Chinese government, and I remember the case, they were going to hand it over to a corporation, and he was holding out, he refused, and so they just steamrolled him to death, just like this family planning worker just dehumanizingly, wantingly just murdered, ran over with his vehicle, a car, a 13-month-old baby boy. I don't know how people can get to that point, but that's the kind of thing you see under authoritarianism. We've got to fight back against it. Other news on Infowars.com. What's behind the punishment for fake guns in schools? That's a John Rappaport article. We've seen a lot of coverage of this, of course, whether it's the 5-year-olds getting in trouble, even arrested, put on their permanent record for bubble guns or kids getting in trouble for drawing guns or talking about guns or making a hand sign for guns. And I remember Brandon Smith, Alt Market, he made a good point that they know it's ridiculous. Obviously, it's not a threat. This is an Orwellian mind-bending event where they're trying to teach an entire new generation of children, obviously very impressionable, not yet in touch with history or their rights or what's going on in this country, trying to teach an entire new generation of children that guns are bad, that they're repulsive, to give them almost a Clockwork Orange-like auto response to the very image, the very idea, the very discussion of guns. And so by punishing a few of these children as examples, all children will have a chilling effect not to get into the gun culture. And that's the very opposite of what our founders talked about. I believe as Richard Henry Lee talked about, we should not only all have personal rights to arm ourselves and be trained in guns, but especially the young should be trained in guns, learn how to use them safely, be responsible, but know how to use them so that no one can run over that culture. That's the makings of a free society. And I know it sounds radical today, but people are rediscovering that. That's what's happened with the Second Amendment. Mike Adams had a great article yesterday highlighting the many victories, maybe between the jaws of defeat, we've seen in the attempt to rein in guns. It's totally revitalized the culture. You've had law enforcement and military standing up to say they're not going to take part in any confiscation. You've had record purchases of guns, people lining up at gun stores, re-engaging in private sales, and preparing to resist the government through words, through the info war. Let's not let it get violent. But if they ever try to trample on our rights that far, we're not going to let them do that either. We'll be back on the other side, a lot more ahead of us. Stay tuned. We're back again, Infowars.com. Alex is going to be back shortly, but today we're trying to hold down the fort. We're going to parade some of our excellent reporters coming up later in the broadcast. David Knight about to join us, Jakari Jackson, David Ortiz, Melissa Melton, also all coming up. And we're going to break down all kinds of things going on in the news. We're going to talk about the cultural war. We're going to talk about the symbols they hit at the Super Bowl and how they hide those symbols in media all the time around us, and how that assaults our psyche and how that contributes to the way they dominate our culture. And just one example of it, of course, we've talked so much about the Second Amendment, about gun rights, and we've talked a lot here at Infowars.com about genocide. Well, yesterday, the Demand a Plan crowd, which comes from the Mayors Against Illegal Guns, that's Bloomberg's group. So you can see already where this is a very globalist-oriented, eugenics-oriented group who really just badly wants to disarm America. Well, they've rounded up all these celebrities they control in so many ways, through the purse strings, through, who knows, lifestyle, blackmail stuff. Tony Bennett, if Americans keep firearms, the rest of the world will really take care of us. Kurt Nemo's got an article highlighting his comments, showing the video, but they rolled out all kinds of celebrities. We talked about Chris Rock yesterday, who is so ignorant and so backwards that he thinks the president is the boss of the country instead of the other way around. The president is just supposed to be an executor of the laws, kind of a bully pulpit representation of the pulse of the people. They're not supposed to rule over us. Other countries have kings. We fought a rebellion. We fought a war. We fought a revolution to not have a king, so that we could have a normal civil society with a balance of power, as much representation as possible. Yet here's these mayors against illegal guns who don't understand the Second Amendment, or some of which who do, but would just love to see the country destroyed, playing into the hands of democide. Now, just remember for a minute, just for context, that Mayor Bloomberg is one of these people who goes to these secret genocidal meetings with Bill Gates, with David Rockefeller, where they talk about how to curb the world's population. It's, you know, those secret billionaire meetings where they bring in the top billionaires, people like Oprah for show, but the real controllers, Bill Gates, David Rockefeller, and their powerful foundations that spread eugenics, family planning, abortion around the world, and who are trying to control the food supply through the GMO issues and doing so much more. Here they are also behind the Mayors Against Illegal Guns via Bloomberg and all these other brainwashed mayors rolling out these celebrities. And what does Tony Bennett say? He says that gun owners basically are like the Nazis, and to paraphrase his remarks, if we don't rein in the gun culture, this gun violence will be taken care of by the rest of the world. In other words, he's suggesting there'll be a world war against America as if they were the Nazi enemy because we haven't restricted our gun rights. Well, that is just a veiled threat for the globalists to conquer America. I mean, that's what it's always been. Every time they disarm, they then commit genocide, atrocities, and of course take rights and rack and ruin these countries to bring them under the yoke of the larger one world government system, for which I would argue the United Nations is just one vehicle of. It's a larger agenda beyond that. That's kind of a shell building framework organization. But like Gulliver's Travels with the Lilliputians, they use 100 ropes, 100 binding things to bring down the big enemy America, to bring down any free country and bind them down with a bunch of small ropes. That's one thing the United Nations does. But Tony Bennett here saying, excuse me, where's that quote? It's the kind of turn that happened to the great country of Germany when Nazis came over and created tragic things and they had to be told off. And if we continue this kind of violence and accept it in our country, the rest of the world's really going to take care of us in a bad way. And I really know history and I understand what's at stake with guns. Yeah, no, you don't. Know Nothing celebrity. And Chris Rock, who's told us that Obama's the dad of the country and our boss, and all these other no-name celebrities insisting that they know best and we must turn in our arms. It's really become a desperate last gasp at this point because they've seen the trends in social media, in the gun purchases. People want the Second Amendment preserved. They're not going to give in. They see through this rhetoric of standing on the back of dead children, whether it be Sandy Hook or the dead victims of the Colorado massacre. Of course, this is almost reaching the point of beating a dead horse, but we must stand our ground for the Second Amendment. And it's just so flimsy. These people with no arguments trying to take away our rights and just pimping for these globalists. I know all about the funding behind it. I know what these billionaires are up to. All these celebrities in these videos, by the way, come from 30 Rock. That's the Rockefeller Center in New York. NBC, all the most controlled aspects of our society. We've got to recognize it, say no. We'll be back. David Knight on the other side. Drones, GMOs, and the Illuminati culture all coming up ahead. We're back at Infowars.com. I'm Aaron Dykes sitting in, but I'm going to be joined today by a number of our reporters, and they're going to bring us some of the most important elements of the smattering of news. Now, at the beginning of the next hour, we're going to start to take some calls. That call-in number is 1-800-259-9231. So let's see what kind of topics you can bring to the table. I hope it's relevant. But joining me now is David Knight, one of our newest members. You've seen him on the Infowars Nightly News. Brings a great deal of knowledge. It's been really interesting to get to know him and pick his brain and see how it balances and meshes with the other information that we've already put together at Infowars. We're always growing here. That's why I love working here, because it's food for the mind. It's re-understanding what's going on in this world and why things are important and why we're taught American history. Well, there's so much behind the scenes because it applies to everything. It's timeless because authoritarians and the mechanisms of power and control just go in cycles. And so, David Knight, tell us what you're bringing to the table today.
Well, thank you, Aaron. I guess today the thing that is really breaking are these John Brennan hearings. And it's kind of important because there's been a lot of leaks this last week about things that are going on with the CIA, with drone assassinations, with torture, that sort of thing. And Brennan has been kind of at the nexus of both torture and assassination. He's been the apologist for this type of policy. As a matter of fact, he's been called by Ron Wyden Obama's counterterrorism chief, essentially. And now they're putting him up for CIA director. So this week, as this is coming today, the hearings are today, but leading up to this, we've had a number of leaks. First, there was a leak from the Holder Justice Department talking about their quote-unquote legal justification for these drone strikes and actually move the bar a little bit from what people understood as to where they were. There were also...
well, by legal, they just say it's legal. They say it's legal to just extrajudicially kill someone, just like they said it was legal to torture even children using, you know, pliers on their genitals in the John Yoo memos and the other related torture memos under the Bush administration. I mean, they'll just say it's legal, but it's disgusting and repugnant to any kind of human morality, to any kind of constitutional notion. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's right, yeah, and we'll talk about the details of that. But, you know, just in general, that was released. Then they also released... some information that the CIA had been involved in renditions using 54 different countries. So basically, this is another kind of legal fiction where the CIA says, you know, well, we don't torture anybody. No, they don't torture people. They kidnap them and send them to other countries where they're tortured. And there's 54 countries, including European countries, that have been involved in this type of thing. It's not just banana republics or third world dictators. And then there was also a leak about a CIA drone base in Saudi Arabia. Now, that's interesting because, and actually that was the base that was used to kill al-Awlaki, the first American citizen who was assassinated by Obama. But that was interesting because that story was covered up for quite some time by the Washington Post. They claim that they released it this week just before the hearings because another news organization was going to release it. But that's a situation where the media is carrying water for the CIA. Well,
in many respects, they're owned by the CIA, you could argue.
Absolutely, absolutely. But this is a clear case so the public can see that this is happening. And, you know, again, the timing of that is somewhat suspicious, you know, with these hearings coming up. The interesting thing about the hearings from a political standpoint is that a lot of this opposition and perhaps a lot of these leaks, like you see coming from the Washington Post, is coming from some Democrats. There's the only resistance that we seem to see, and it is actually pretty weak and ineffective resistance to these policies, is from some Democrats. The Republicans, by and large, are kind of cheering this stuff on. You know, they're all for torture and that sort of thing. As a matter of fact, last night I heard, as I was driving home on the radio, I heard Sean Hannity had somebody on his show, and they were taking this classic left-right paradigm to the extreme, where the one fellow that was a Democrat was defending Obama's assassination programs while he was criticizing Bush's torture programs. And then, of course, Hannity took exactly the opposite position, that torture was fine, but assassination was bad. And it's like the only thing that's being tortured here is reason and morality and the legality of doing this stuff. I mean, it was such a tortured discussion. It was just amazing to hear these guys try to jump through hoops to defend one position and not the other, because there is no legal or moral justification for what they're doing, either one of these guys, but they're defending it strictly on partisan grounds like that.
Well, obviously not. Now, John Brennan, of course, as we mentioned already, was behind the kill list. He's the one who comes to Obama each week and says, here's the targets we want to send drones over and strike. Now, they want to exploit our emotions and try to tell us that 20 children who are dead at Sandy Hook by a random killer who apparently was not properly profiled in society, that we should worry about that. Well, here's two killers that we know about in the White House who have children's blood on their hands. They drone striked a 17-year-old girl. John Brennan has the 17-year-old girl's blood on his hands. So does Obama.
Yeah, and just from a pragmatic standpoint, one of the articles was talking about a Muslim cleric who had taken a stand against al-Qaeda in his country. And he got a call from al-Qaeda, and they said, we want to meet with you. So, you know, he assigned a time and a place to meet with them. He took a local law enforcement guy with him as kind of a backup. 3 al-Qaeda show up, and the 5 of them are talking, and a drone strike hits, vaporizes all 5 of them and a nearby camel. Okay, now this guy, if they wanted to really do something in terms of winning hearts and minds, I mean, if you want to buy into the Republican vision of what this war is about, that it really is some kind of a crusade, you know, moral crusade, which I don't believe that it is. I believe this whole thing is a false paradigm, that it's set up by the CIA. That
it's a sham for geopolitical control as well as domestic control.
Absolutely. But even if you want to take the position that, you know, these drone strikes are saving American lives, it's like, really, exactly how are they saving American lives? I mean, are they saving American lives because, you know, they're keeping the military from going in and attacking these people? I mean, first of all, is this war justified? But then, secondly, when they destroy somebody like that, that is essentially on their side of the issue, that is opposing al-Qaeda, all that does is inflame the righteous indignation of the people who are there. Think about Pearl Harbor. Think about the standard, again, the standard historical perspective of Pearl Harbor. You have the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor. Now, clearly, you know, we were arming and a threat to them, more so even than you could, you know, certainly more so than al-Qaeda is a threat to us. Okay, and you could argue that an attack was imminent. And yet, people, it resonates with people that that was a day of infamy, that that was an unjustified, preemptive attack. And under the age-old moral rules of war, you don't go to war preemptively. You only
Whoever strikes first is the moral loser.
Exactly, exactly. That goes all the way back to Augustine, 300 AD. And he basically laid out the, excuse me, he laid out the case for a just war. And what he said was, you don't strike first. You don't do more than you have to. And it's the same sort of situation if somebody breaks in your home. Once they are subdued, you don't keep shooting, So that type of thing, there's several aspects to just war. When you violate that morally, then, you are on a losing side. You invigorate the other side if there are legitimately two sides.
Well, that's the whole thing. That's why domestically here in America, we've got to recognize these authoritarians and kick them out of power, because they are bringing all that moral indignation upon our nation in our name, even though they don't represent us. They're not accountable to us. But they've been, all that torture stuff is about humiliating the Muslim, Islamic, Arabic, general Middle East cultures, doing things with children, doing sexual things in these torture dungeons, these drone strikes, not seeing the face of the enemy. All that is about inflaming them while they discredit them and try to paint them in a bad light through the Al-Qaeda mechanism, which they have raised as a specter for more than 40, 50 years, but especially in the last couple of decades. We talked about Anwar al-Awlaki. He's on record. He dined at the Pentagon. He was brought there. He was investigated by the FBI, but apparently cleared through the CIA, through the Justice Department. We know the hijackers were allowed to travel on visas. And these are just fronts for the American and Western intelligence apparatus. It's like a can opener. Like, you just paint the bad guy, and then you can go into any country you want.
Absolutely. And if you look at these that takes us to the other part of this. These 54 countries that were involved in extraordinary renditions is the euphemism that they use. You had Libya under Gaddafi, was a partner of the CIA in torture. You had Egypt under Mubarak. You had Syria under Assad, Iran under Ahmadinejad. These are all people that we're told we have to go to war to take out, and yet they're partners with the CIA in torturing people. It's the same kind of phony paradigm that, we've got this guy is actually a bad guy, but like you said, al-Awlaki went into the Pentagon and was dining with people, right? So these same people that like Gaddafi that we go in to take out, he was actually helping us to torture people with the CIA.
I think the simplest way to sum it up is that the worst people rise to the top in every culture, every country. We learn to respect them and trust them because they look like us, because we're from that particular area of the world. And they all secretly work behind the scenes through these shadow government apparatuses to dominate people everywhere worldwide. But specifically with these 54-plus torture dungeons, they've misdirected us into only talking about Guantanamo Bay, which, by the way, Obama the liar promised to close, never did. And, of course, bad things happen at Guantanamo, all the weird sensory deprivation, force-feeding stuff, and general torture. But, yeah, then you've got these black hole prisons in places like Romania and Poland and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Libya and all around the world. And just like these free trade zones where they make everyone in the world operate under globalism rules, that's bad for most of the general public, but then they always have exception zones, so-called, free zones, where they're allowed to not pay taxes in whatever local country they're in, not subject to any of the laws there. And it's just this black hole culture where they think they can get away with whatever they want. And it must be horrible in these prisons.
Yeah, one article that I thought was really good was from antiwar.com, and it had 20 facts that you should know about extraordinary rendition. And as I was listening, like I said, I listened to conservative radio and Fox News and how they were spinning this stuff, trying to defend torture at the same time than trying to attack assassinations. And what they were saying was, that this is not really that bad. I mean, this is, waterboarding is not really, kind of scaring people, or you're depriving them of sleep or whatever. This is truly, I don't have time to read all of this, but it is truly amazing. You've got innocent people, like a German national who happens to be Arabic or Islamic or whatever, kidnapped. That's what extraordinary renditioning is. Kidnapped and taken to Afghanistan, tortured for 77 days. You've got one guy who was seized in Iran, held for 77 days in the CIA's dark prison in Afghanistan, subjected to sleep deprivation, hung from the ceiling by his arms in a strappado position, threatened by dogs, made to watch torture videos, subjected to sounds of electronic sawing accompanied by cries of pain. You've got one of these fellows who is threatened to have a relative of his, this is another common thing that they do, is bring in children, wives, mothers, and threaten to torture them in front of the people. And it's just amazing the stuff that you see here. This is our government. Okay, this is our government, the CIA, that is at the center of, you've got all these 54 countries, and their names have been made public, and it's creating scandals in the UK and other European countries. People are calling for people to resign. But at the center of it is our government.
Our government, hijacked by the repugnants, are modeling themselves on literal brainwashing techniques from communist China, North Korea, from the Spanish Inquisition. It's the worst of the worst stuff done in our name, and it's so insulting to everyone involved.
And yet what you see here is you can't get a unified front from either the Democrats or the Republicans to say, this is wrong, let's stop it. These perpetual wars are wrong, let's stop them. Instead, they're just trying to defend their guy. If their guy is torturing but not assassinating or this or that. But, it was even more ridiculous for the Democrat because Obama is continuing all these torturing programs as well as adding assassination. I mean, that's the actual thing that's going on. It's not like he stopped the torturing. Of course he didn't stop the torturing. He's just adding this assassination, especially of American citizens. And that's one of the things in this legal memo that was really amazing is that is to see what they say to defend it. They say that it is, it's legal, it's effective, and one of the things that they pointed out in the memo, they had 4 conditions, and they said that you need to have an informed, high-level official of the U.S. government determine that the targeted individual poses an imminent threat of violence against the United States. 2, capture is not feasible, and 3, the operation will be conducted in a manner consistent with the application of with applicable laws of war principles. Well, it has to be all 3 of those, right? And if it's going to be applicable with the law of war principles, then it's going to fail every time. Because, again, we're back to a situation where they're not only saying that, we were concerned about the drone assassinations initially because they were being conducted against people who had not been given due process. Okay, that was what everybody was concerned about. But they're not even saying that they need to have studied this situation and determined that this person was responsible for an attack. They're not even saying that that person is planning an attack. Now what they're saying is it's enough that that person is associated with Al-Qaeda or some other group that they have labeled as terrorist.
And see how they're moving the football field? First, it's we were attacked, so let's go get retaliation. Well, that's one thing. But now it's all the way whittled down to, well, you're associated with people who might be Al-Qaeda, might be extremists. And that's just what's so disgusting because you can see how they're trying to bring the war home here to occupy America and to target dissidents. It happens in every country. It's very historical. But again, this drone stuff, this torture stuff, completely is a continuation, a parallel to the worst of the abuses under the Bush administration, which is a complete upending of our entire country. And again, they were already torturing people, already doing all this extrajudicial stuff, but then they write white papers and memos out of the White House to justify it after the fact.
Yes, and I would say to people like Hannity who say that waterboarding is not torture, is he aware of the fact that that waterboarding was done by Japanese officers against Allied soldiers during World War II, and that those Japanese officers were considered to be war criminals? Some of them were executed for doing that. That's what we understood. I mean, it's amazing how we have slid down this slope. After we look at the standards and say, if you attack a country before that country has attacked you, that is a gross and immoral violation of law and of ethics. But now we accept that. And we say that, we can torture people with water. When they tortured people with waterboarding, when the Japanese did it, it was a horrific thing. And these people were criminals. Now we defend it.
I agree with you, but it's like they want us to focus on the tree instead of the forest. They want us in a semantical debate over what waterboarding is. For one thing, it's all about the context. If you're in a dungeon or a cell being surrounded by guys, you could just wave a finger in front of someone's face for enough hours and it becomes torturous.
Yeah, absolutely. But here, going to the assassination stuff, I mean, here's an exchange with the director of the FBI. This is about a year ago. This representative said, so I guess from a historical perspective, this is Representative Tom Gray's
Hold that thought. We're coming up on the break. Again, we're going to do calls later in the next hour. 1-800-259-9231. We'll be back with David Knight. A lot more news ahead. Stay tuned. Infowars.com. We'll be back on the other side. And we do need to let them stop depraving us, stop forcing us. At what point are we going to say no? I'd like to get into some of the GMO news in the next hour, but we do want your calls as well. 1-800-259-9231. Now back to David Knight on the topic of drones, on the topic of torture, and really on the topic of how long is this phony war on terror going to continue? We're already 12 years into it. There's not a real enemy. It's pretty clear. It's a shadow enemy. We've exposed in so many ways how the Al-Qaeda, so-called, is really just an asset of the larger shadow government, CIA and Pentagon-run operation to try to dominate geopolitically the world and really try to rescind the rights of Americans and get them under the yoke. But we've had the whole Arab Spring uprisings, which they clearly incited but miscalculated, I believe. And there's so many ways they're inducing more and more blowback, and drones are one of them. They want to have this ongoing war, this never-ending empire to control the world, for America to be the first and last superpower, as PNAC, the Project for New American Century, dubbed it. And yet our troops have been overstretched. They're in so many bases around the world. And moreover, they're demoralized because they realize in so many of the regular troops that what we're doing is wrong, that it's not for the reasons we've been told. We know the WMD things are a lie. So that's one of the major reasons we're seeing drones, why they're now trying to legitimize them. David Knight, your response.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about when is this war on terror going to end? Well, it's not going to end because, as Ron Paul and others have pointed out, it's a war on a tactic. It's like saying you're going to declare war on sneak attacks. You know, we didn't declare war on sneak attacks when we were attacked by Pearl Harbor, right? And then what they've done is they've extended this so that, you know, as you're seeing now, you know, first it was like, you know, well, we're going to go after some people that supposedly are behind a specific event. Okay, then it becomes people who are maybe planning to do something. Now it's just people who are associated with that. And what we should all worry about is that when they say that's somebody that's merely associated with a terrorist group, let's understand that, you know, the MIAC report were constitutionalists, conservatives, people who voted for Ron Paul, for Chuck Baldwin.
Puts pretty much any thinking individual in the terrorist category.
Right, right. People who are libertarians, conservatives, Tea Party members. These are the types of people that have repeatedly been classified and tagged as terrorist opponents in war games by the military and memos recently from West Point strategizing about war on terror, and the MIAC report from 2009. I mean, there's too many of these to go through, but there's so many places where we see that, yes, clearly there are many people in the government and in the press and places like the Southern Poverty Law Center repeatedly characterize constitutionalists, libertarians, conservatives, Tea Party people as terrorists. So this should very much, and the fact that it's an American citizen that is being gone after, once we get to the point where they don't have to give us due process, they don't even have to claim that there is an event that they're reacting to or a plan that they're reacting to, you're just merely associated with an ideology, which is what's going on here. That's a very dangerous situation for everybody. That part now that has now just resurfaced with this legal memo is something that we should all be very concerned. And, you know, as this is coming up, again, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee is none other than Dianne Feinstein. This woman seems to be at the center of everything pretty much that's evil. And she had a quote about this hearing about John Brennan that's coming up today. And she said that they would consider his information.
We're up against the hour. Finish your point, and we'll come back on the other side.
Well, basically what she's saying is that this is good that these memos have been leaked because we need to be transparent about it, as if transparency itself were virtue, and it isn't.
Well, it's virtuous if you otherwise have some virtue. We'll be back in just 1 minute on the other side in the second hour. Infowars.com. A lot more news ahead. Other reporters, stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in the second hour. This is Infowars.com on the Alex Jones Show. Alex is taking a day off, well-deserved break. He needs to spend some time with his family, reset, relax. Meanwhile, we've got new uncertainty in Tunisia after assassination, and this is coming in. I'm just seeing it for the first time, but apparently there's riots going on, and you name it. And this is just more evidence that the Western concocted Arab Spring has gone the wrong direction, or perhaps the direction they intended all along, to sow the seeds of chaos so that they, the supposed controllers, can bring order out of chaos. And we're seeing these countries, Egypt slipping into total despotism, Tunisia with fresh riots, and the rest of the entire region in increasing disarray. Iran is doing new posturing, saying they've had nuclear all along, but are no threat to Israel. They continue to leave on the table the possibility of a wider World War III type scenario, and we just hope it doesn't come to that. But meanwhile, it's increasingly clear to me, we were talking before the break about how they've targeted and painted Americans who just have an ideology as potential terrorists, as extremists who need to be watched, monitored, reined in, preemptively checked, pulled over at checkpoints, arrested. And they really want to just clamp down so that everyone becomes a dependent on the system and just looks up to Big Daddy Obama, as Chris Rock called him, looks up to our boss, the president, and just lets them top down tell us what to do, even though they're known liars, known criminals, admitted murderers, at least through the military apparatus, through these cowardly and unwise drone strikes. And you were getting into the supposed virtues of tyranny. Well, there's no virtue in a tyranny, even through transparency.
That's right. What we're seeing is the reactions of even the people who oppose some of this are really kind of looking to Obama as some kind of a dictator to just tell them where we are on all this. As I was saying just before the break, Feinstein was saying that on Tuesday, she said, well, this white paper was released without the consent of the administration, so that should quell calls for more transparency. Well, Obama didn't release that, so it's not transparency on his part. And it's not a virtue if even if he had released that information, it's not a virtue to say, oh, guess what, I'm going to tell you about these illegal assassinations that I'm doing without any due process of American citizens, and you should be proud of me because I'm openly telling you about it. What that tells us is that he's lost any sense of shame over violating these legal, moral, and ethical, considerations, over violating his oath to the Constitution. But even someone who opposes him, now that's Feinstein, who's head of the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Another senator, Ron Wyden, is actually opposed to John Brennan and has some questions about him. But listen to what he says. He says he has questions like, how much evidence does the president need to decide that a particular American is part of a terrorist group? Does the president have to provide individual Americans with an opportunity to surrender? Can the president or the intelligence agencies or the military kill an American who is inside the United States? These are questions that need to be answered in a way that is consistent.
And you see, once again, how they move the goalposts, how they're bringing it home to America.
Right. They're bringing it home to America. But also look at what the attitude is behind these questions that he asks. Basically, he's saying, please, dictator, tell me what the new law is out of your mouth. It's as if we didn't have a Constitution because they don't pay any attention to it. And so when you get rid of the Constitution, when you say that it is a living document that isn't a controlling legal authority, as Al Gore said, we have no controlling legal authority here. As Ron Wyden is saying, we don't know where the administration is. Tell us where we are. You're standing on slippery sand. You have no foundation to stand on.
Slippery sand, slippery slope leads to all-out despotism and tyranny. It's just happened over and over in history. That's what's so frustrating about it. We'll get more into that. We're going to take calls as soon as we get on the other side of this break. And, of course, David Knight will be hosting the Infowars Nightly News tonight. We're doing it live this week, ladies and gentlemen. How exciting is that? Tune in, tell your friends, subscribe, share it. Let's get the word out. Let's change things. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is being made and remade according to a very disgusting, dark, repugnant to the Constitution, authoritarian design. Just this week, we see as Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner leaves office for Jacob Lew to take his place. He's rejoining the Council on Foreign Relations, vowed to destroy the country. They've got new news on GMO. But back to David Knight first. You were finishing up your points on torture, on drones, on this whole war on terror.
Yeah, there was just one exchange that I thought was really critical. It took place about a year ago, and it was Representative Tom Graves talking to FBI Director Robert Mueller. And Tom Graves said to him, so I guess from a historical perspective, does the federal government have the ability to kill a U.S. citizen on United States soil or only overseas? And this is what the FBI Director said. I'm going to defer that to others in the Justice Department. would not give them a clear answer. So we know where this is headed, right?
Oh,
because, yeah. And when the Justice Department came in, Eric Holder said that there are no limits to, quote, the geographic scope of our ability to use force. And they made it clear, all these senators who cannot find it amongst themselves to oppose torture or to oppose drone assassinations, these are also the senators that just voted this last November unanimously for the indefinite detention of American citizens on American soil under the NDAA.
Oh, yeah, they bent over and just passed the NDAA, you know, completely stripping away any of the last vestiges of our due process, of our Bill of Rights. But just read that quote one more time, because we've seen how they're trying to bring the drone war, the occupation of America home. That's put all the continuity of government, all the leaked documents about FEMA camps to just general Homeland Security operations, all the painting of dissidents and patriots and returning veterans. They want them all in the eyes of the public, you know, disarmed in terms of their ideology and their ability just to operate and be individuals in this country. Read that quote one more time, because they are planning to bring home this war to American soil.
Holder said there are no limits to the geographic scope of our ability to use force. No limits. And clearly they don't see there's any legal limits to what they can do in terms of the military use of using the military as police, militarizing the police, you know, indefinite detention without trial, execution of people without trial, execution of people even without a crime having been committed, without evidence of a crime even being planned, merely by somebody's association with a group that they target and label as terrorist. And that's a label that we've talked about has been thrown around pretty indiscriminately and at a lot of people.
And there's Eric Holder, knowingly with the blood of Fast and Furious on his hands, and he and John Brennan and Obama think that because they do these unconstitutional, immoral things by proxy, that somehow that doesn't morally fall back on them. They're going to have a big price to pay in their soul, but at the same time, we've got to work overtime to expose them, to get them out of power. I want to go to a call, and we can continue this discussion. Frank in Indiana, you've been holding the longest.
Thank you, gentlemen. And what I wanted to talk about is exactly what you're talking about. First of all, I want to call everyone, make your peace with God. Pick up the Bible, start in Matthew or John. And second of all, now is the time for civil disobedience and for political activism. You're going along with what you guys are saying. That's why they're putting 30,000 drones in the skies. That's why they're putting all these TV shows demonizing the founding fathers and guns. Because it's getting to the point to where they are going to call the Americans the terrorists, and they will justify killing us. And that's exactly where it's headed to. You look at all the rounds of ammo, almost 2 billion rounds of ammo. Why? Why? Think about it, people. Now's the time to stand up, because listening to the show just isn't enough. I plead with everybody, please stand up and take action. And one more thing I would like to suggest, I'd like to suggest a come and take it bumper sticker with Infowars.com at the bottom of it.
Great.
I agree. And of course, you're right. We need to get right with God. But the other reason to go read the Bible is, you know, a lot of Christian people sometimes just focus on the New Testament. The Old Testament is an incredible line of how history cycles over and over. And when the Jewish people broke the covenant, they were always dominated, and they would have a usurper take over, or they'd be taken over by another tribe. And you can see over and over again how when you break the system, when you go against the Constitution, in the case of our country, the moral indignation, the ruin that it brings upon you. Your response, David? Well,
that brings us to the interpretation of Romans 13, right? Many churches have adopted the same interpretation of it that was popular in Nazi Germany, which is if somebody is an authority, they're obviously been put there by God and they have the right to do whatever they want to. That's how you get to Nuremberg. But the real interpretation of Romans 13 is that God establishes governments to help to establish legal authority and to create, you know, a peaceful system. And once these governments get out of line of what is good, what God defines as good, out of things that are absolutely, you know, obviously moral to everybody, whether you're a Christian or not, you understand that, you know, killing people who haven't done anything to harm somebody, that grates against you, whether you're a Christian or not. You've got that natural understanding of that. And so once you get a government that starts acting in a criminal way, that's essentially the same as if you've got a father in a family who is abusing his wife or children. that father no longer is using the role that he is no longer in the legitimate role that he's been put in. He has lost his authority. That's what's happened to our government. And as the caller points out, it's time for us to start doing things, looking for organizations, looking for ways to peacefully and legally try to stop this with civil disobedience, because it is quite clear that we're not going to find any allies in either the Republican or the Democratic Party. You know, there's one.
No, we know who they're working
for. And we know that the electoral system is completely corrupted. And so we can see that none of them have any problems with these policies that we're talking about of assassination, endless undeclared war, torturing, you name it. You know, suspending due process for people, suspending.
Well, that's why the Bible also talks about my people perish for a lack of a vision. We have to use the Infowars, a vector point, to re-identify. Are you going to be with the Bill of Rights? Are you going to be for due process? Or are you going to be just for arbitrary law and dictators running roughshod all over everyone? Now, our next caller, I see the name is Matt Lepasic. That's one of the biggest We Are Change activists. He's been doing this for years, met him at events over the years. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Hey, I'm calling in today because this is one of those red alert type of days. We found out on January 25th, Keith Pantaleon, one of another old We Are Change member here in New York, was actually arrested on some very, very, very serious charges. You may have heard the other day when Glenn called in from New Jersey to let everybody know when I first found out. So we're trying to get the word out. You know, Keith's been with us since 2008, and now he's been in jail in Hudson County since the 25th of January. He's in jail right now.
Hold on one second. They're saying they have the story over there. Can we pull that up while you're giving us the story here? I just want to see what's going on. Okay, they're letting me know in the booth. They've been following this story. Please continue, Matt.
Well, a pseudo-journalist over there at NJ.com ran a wonderful hit piece associating Keith with the Sandy Hook massacre because he simply had a rifle and a handgun and a couple of other weapons in his home, all of which were legally acquired. This is the big bullet point here. Is what happened is that the upstairs tenant in Keith's apartment simply called the police. Called the police because he didn't have heat in his building. The police arrived at Keith's apartment, and the landlord was there and let him into Keith's apartment. Not knowing that Keith was there, Keith heard some noises, and he immediately reacted, and he left his bedroom to find a man standing in his living room, dressed in plain black, and then he saw his door was open, a police officer and a landlord. Keith at that time had his gun in his hand. He was responding to noises, and at that point, the police officer arrested him. We have a pretty much a campaign right now at tyrannyredalert.com. I hate to ask for donations. We never like doing this, but tyrannyredalert.com is a quick domain that we bought, which is redirecting to Keith's donation page. Keith is currently on a $75,000 bond. We're currently looking to get $10,000 in order to get the attorney. Keith's father has already donated $5,000. Wonderful people like all of you have already donated at tyrannyredalert.com.
Can we pull that story back up? We found it. It's been in the New Jersey press, the very story you're talking about. Jersey City police say man had a legal rifle, handguns, prohibited bullets in his home. So people can look at that headline to see more about the story. So what exactly has he been charged with?
As of right now, his charges are unlawful possession of 2 handguns, unlawful possession of his rifle, unlawful possession of his ammunition, and felony possession of an assault rifle. All because without a warrant, without so much even as a knock on the door, the landlord lets gentlemen, police officers, into his apartment. And when Keith simply opens his bedroom door, he sees police officers. He's got a gun in his hand. He immediately realizes what's going down. He puts the gun down. The officer asks, "What was that?" Because it was in its holder, all zipped up. The officer then immediately saw the gun and arrested him. Didn't ask for receipts. Didn't even check the validity of any of the guns. Nowadays, in 2013, you have got a gun, you are a enemy.
Sure, they brainwashed everybody. So, yeah, that's the case of Keith Pantaleon. We can look that up. David Keith?
That certainly is a case that's going on there. You know, there's been other cases. There was one, I remember a guy was in the process of moving across country, and he was just stopping through New Jersey, I believe. He had in his trunk some weapons that were stored in his trunk, along with the other stuff he was clearly moving. And his mother was concerned about him, called the police. They pulled the guy over and then conducted a search of his car, found the weapons, and then wanted to send him to jail for a very long time. These types of things that you're seeing happening in New Jersey, this is what's going to happen across the country if these kinds of gun control laws go through. This is what we all need. You know, help this person here, but also understand this is a pattern of tyranny and of jeopardy that is going to be facing all gun owners if we don't stop.
Or the other case where the New York police say, we don't have a duty to protect you and we'll stand by even if you're being stabbed by a serial killer. We're going to get to more calls on the other side. Jakari Jackson coming up to bring some fresh news to us. David Ortiz, Melissa Melton later in the broadcast. And stay tuned. We got exciting stuff. We're back at Infowars.com on the other side of this break. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to be joined by Jakari Jackson. He's going to be covering some rather disturbing news. Yeah, there's a dark side to the Super Bowl, and there's something that happens to society when we give in and reduce ourselves to bread and circuses. That's why we need to accelerate this reawakening. But we're going to jam in some calls. Cody in Pennsylvania, thanks for holding. Are you there?
Hey, Aaron. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm all right. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, my comment was in reference to you and David were talking about just how DHS and, you know, other government groups are targeting gun owners, libertarians, and things like that. I had an experience before the both of the shootings happened in Colorado in Newtown, where I tried to purchase a handgun and was denied, although I have no felonies or any misdemeanors that would be considered, restriction on owning a handgun.
So you think you were flagged in the system for political speech, or what's going on?
Well, the thing is later on, I had a gun stolen out of my car, my first handgun, which I was approved for, and it was about 2 years old before it got stolen, and I went to report it to the police station, and the police told me that it was in the original owner's name and that the state hadn't put in the information.
Oh, so they forced the registration and the tracking of serial numbers, and then you get identified as the criminal when an actual criminal steals your weapon. Isn't that interesting? Something that doesn't seem to come up in the mainstream discussion. Well, let me give you 30 more seconds and we're going to move on.
Yeah, I just said if I got, pulled over and they wanted to check my car and, everything else because I have political speech stickers on my car, and I had my handgun and I was legally carrying it, I would have went to jail until they figured out that they made a mistake. And I probably would have been denied a handgun for that reason after the fact until they sorted their mess out and, with no regard to my safety.
I hear you. It's troubling. Your phone's a little bad, so I'm going to let you go, but I appreciate the call. That is something to think about, how registration can unfairly target someone and deny them their Second Amendment rights. There's so many troubling aspects with the gun control agenda that they want. We've analyzed it in detail. Let's see what Janos in Canada has to say. Thanks for holding.
Hi, how are you?
I'm hanging in there. What are you bringing to the discussion today?
Can I express myself, or I need to follow the exact topic of the gun control?
It's open phones, but you got to move quickly because we're coming up on a break and we're trying to jam phones.
Okay. I stopped watching television. There's so much evil there. All this mind control there is just incredible, and what I wanted to say is that it's so demonized. They try to hypnotize people's minds and souls, so you don't have time for your family. You can't be focused. It's all propaganda on TV. I cannot believe this. Me as a believer, as a Christian, I trust Jesus, and that's what I say to people, to all Americans and Canadians, to trust Jesus. Jesus is the way. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me. But people now, they're putting their faith in the governments. They believe all these lies all the time. And I don't vote for governmental officials. I don't vote for, let's say, example, Stephen Harper from Canada or Obama. They're all Freemasons. They're all liars.
They're all caught up in the system, and all these entertainers are too, and that's why we see at these Super Bowls and other high television rituals such an extreme display of these occultic hidden symbols, and there is an aspect of mind control going on. It seems unbelievable to many people, but if you look more deeply into it, it's there. We're going to get into that in the third hour, actually, so I appreciate you bringing the topic. Let's finish out the segment with Dave in Arizona. Thanks for holding, Dave.
Oh, yes. Hi, Aaron. I'm just going to hit you right with the jab first. I think the mark of the beast is in effect right now. And I'm going to explain why. We don't want to be part of the evil done by the United States. Is that correct?
Yeah, you got about 40 seconds, but I'm with you on the point.
Hey, we have freedom of religion. Is that correct?
We're told we are, and it's pretty much what we decide to express, though.
Okay, well, the United States forces us to keep the beast alive. What if my religion says I cannot take the name of an evil nation or use a number by which money is taken from my wages? What if I want to think one way, but a government tries to force me to think another?
You can't own property. It's hard to get a job, if not impossible, without a Social Security number. You've got to buy and sell under the cashless grid. It's coming. Thanks for your call. We are going to break, but we're going to be back on the other side with Jakari Jackson. We're back at Infowars.com. Again, Aaron Dykes sitting in, but Jakari Jackson is joining me. And it's true, you can decide what you're going to believe, how far down the rabbit hole you're going to go. But if you do go, don't look away. Embrace the truth, because there's some powerful stuff going on. If we don't route it out, we're all going to be toppled over by that evil. Now, we're going to get into the Super Bowl and some of the many dangerous aspects of it. But first, let's jam in one more call. JC in Connecticut, thanks for holding.
Hey, how you doing today?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I wanted to talk really quick about a couple things. First of all, I want to get into the grand simulation thing. It's cool to call it a computer simulation. I believe it's a little more advanced than that, obviously, considering we're taking a tiny, tiny slice of it and then using our most powerful computer to decode it. But as all computers are, they're built on code. Our computers are built on binary. If anyone's interested in the code of the universe, I would look up sacred geometry. But I had one more thing I wanted to get into. Yesterday, something happened on air. Alex started getting really, it started getting to him. I could hear it in his voice, and it got to me, too, because I feel the same way. I could hear all these things, all this information. I'm pretty sure a lot of your listeners have the same thing. It's not his fault. He's not trying to bring anyone down. But that's the nature of the information. This is the only show that gives out the good information, which is great. But I wanted to put something into the awareness of people. I wanted to, if anyone's out there who is into the reason why everything is so depraved and everything is so messed up, there's an article on called "Rise of the Archons," and another one called "Never," and then "Never Call Them Archons." Now, it's really out there. Most people, a lot of your listeners, people ridiculed him on getting into God and Jesus and religion and all that. And you know what? That's great that he believes in the one true God, the one person everyone has to answer to. It's not necessarily religion to believe in someone who has all the answers to the one person where everything was created from. Or not person, so much being. But I wanted to get that out there. I hate when people start ridiculing God, because I do the same thing with religion. As soon as someone starts talking religion, starts talking God, there's a negative connotation there. And people start thinking, oh, he's into religion and I can't listen to it.
Sure.
But it's not, there is a one true being out there, and everyone's got to answer to him, but everyone is a product of that creation with the same free will that creator has and has given us. So if reading up on the Archons, it's something that even if you ridicule it and don't view it as truth, you are now aware of that possibility.
I appreciate that, caller, and I wasn't necessarily going to get into the whole are we a computer simulation aspect today. It's obviously deeply philosophical, but the Bible talks about it being a great test, clearly refers to dimensions. If you don't go for that metaphor, if you want to take it as a metaphor rather than truth, you've got the Matrix. Either way you look at it, we're being deceived, yet the actions we take, the moral stances we take make a difference in this world. Martin Luther King talked about how the universe tends towards justice. Well, that's only if we stand with our free will, as you mentioned, on principle and turn against the darkness. If we stand down, if we look away, if we don't hold accountable those who've taken the reins of power, they're going to try to tip it towards darkness, annihilation, and really it's a good segue into the kind of topic we're going to talk about. Jakari Jackson, you've been reading through the news, you've been growing your mind here at the Infowars, already a great mind and a great voice when you came here, but it is such a dark and deep rabbit hole. There's so much information, but it reaches a point, doesn't it?
Oh, it definitely does. It definitely does. And before I get into my topic right here, I just want people to know we're following the situation in Tunisia, and I believe it's the article we have pulled up on our screen in here. I believe this gentleman's name is Choki Belaid, was shot dead outside his home on Wednesday morning, throwing the country into confusion and prompting angry protest. That's seems to be one of the things that sparked the recent protest in Tunisia. So just wanted to throw that out there. But yes, what you were saying, Aaron, it's kind of a dark time, and I believe Melissa Melton has already touched on this, and I believe she'll be touching on it again today. Some of the occultism going on at the Super Bowl and other big events, not just the Super Bowl. I'm not blaming, the Baltimore Ravens for, all these Illuminati symbols and whatever else going on. But there is a dark side to sporting events in general. And like I said, I'm not blaming the sports, institutions. But we have this article out of the Huffington Post. Super Bowl is single largest human trafficking incident in U.S., says the Attorney General. Now, this is something that came to my attention a few months ago, and it really bothered me to see that there's such a large gathering for human trafficking, but it's something under the table. We even talked about a little bit when Formula One came here, and I actually have an article about that I'll get to in a second, about how so many people are trafficked at these events. Prostitutes are brought in, some of them underage, and it's this big show in the sportsmanship and all that's well and good, but then you have this underside when the game's over and people go to the hotels, they go wherever, and they interact with these prostitutes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And human trafficking isn't just sexual trafficking; it's debt bondage, indentured servitude, and we'll start off with some sexual bondage, but it's all types of things. I just want to read a little bit from this article. According to Forbes, 10,000 prostitutes were brought to Miami for the Super Bowl in 2010. As of Friday, this is in current times. As of Friday, 5 women were rescued and 8 human trafficking-related arrests were made in New Orleans, according to Fox 8. And that's just the tip. I mean, I have stacks. I originally wasn't even going to talk about this today because I didn't think I could get enough information in time. The problem was I didn't have enough time to read through all these articles. There was just so much information on the topic. And I have this next story from the International Business Times. Sex trafficking at the Super Bowl. Does America's dirtiest secret tarnish the NFL's biggest event? And once again, I'm not blaming the NFL or any of these organizations, but this is definitely something that's going on at these events.
Well, it's a societal thing.
Yeah. And it's all over. It's the NFL. It's in this one is about the NBA. Now, this isn't so much about trafficking at the NBA, but the NBA got to a point they said we need to speak out against this, and they actually went to Greece to demonstrate against it. I mean, it's a huge problem.
Well, look how the Super Bowl brings together kind of the worst aspects of society. I think it's great to be an athlete, being competitive and trying to make yourself as good as you could be. Obviously makes sense. Being on sports teams is fine. But in general, we've got a degraded, slipping away society. We're falling apart at the seams because people are tuning into these sporting events. They're losing touch with what's important, their family, the reasons for the country, the most important institutions, keeping people accountable. It's very much a parallel to Roman history, which was a republic as well for 600 years. Then it was taken over by emperors, and things just went downhill because the population in general, they called it bread and circuses. They'd be paid off with doles of bread, given free stuff, given entertainment, and this allowed them to get into the mindset of buying into gladiatorial sports, celebrating, 2 warriors killing each other just for sport, just for show, bringing in slaves and letting them be slaughtered by a gladiator who himself is a slave but is a highly trained one.
Exactly.
And this is, again, it's not the athletes necessarily. It's that the Super Bowl is the big spectacle. It's where all of television watching culminates in a focus point.
I believe this last one was the most watched event in history, if I saw that.
But look at who attends the Super Bowl. Those are high-priced tickets. These are elite, rich people. not all rich people bad, of course, but many of them get into these decadent forms of society, you know, using prostitutes. And that's why you have 10,000 prostitutes there, this epidemic of child slavery. And it just goes along with actually the kind of Masonic, satanic, Illuminati type symbolism that we've seen put on display by Madonna, by these other entertainers and artists. This year was Beyonce. People wonder why we talk about celebrities and what they show in their entertainment. Well, it's a big mass ritual, a big spectacle for culture, and it's meant to represent the overall culture of sports watching, television viewing, and it kind of underscores where we're at in society. But get back to the actual human trafficking stuff, because it's a big problem in general in society. And here it is at what everybody perceives to be an innocent event, the Super Bowl. You get your chips, you have some snack foods at home, and you get together with your buddies. Right. But there's a lot more to it underneath what people see.
Exactly. And we even have this article here. ESPN, you know, got to a point where they had to talk about it. This was particularly about the World Cup back in 2010, and it said the Johannesburg police estimated that 38,000 children each year were being forced into prostitution in South Africa. Some estimates are that the number is closer to 20,000, but even if it's 20,000, you know, and just in this one area, and that's where they had the World Cup a few years ago. And then this article I was referring to about Austin, few arrests, no minor victims at Formula One sex trafficking operation. And this article goes on to say they arrested 13 prostitutes at the Formula One event just a few months ago. And I mean, it goes on from there. That's just the opening of Pandora's box, so to speak. And I have these FBI crime statistics from back in 2010. And this is human trafficking incident cases open for investigation between January 2008 and 2010. So these are just the incidents that had cases opened on them. Many of these incidents go
vastly unreported. Oh yeah, exactly.
And I mean, it's shocking to me because you see they had a total, and these are just the ones I know about, 2,515 total incidents. They have sex trafficking at over 2,000, labor trafficking over 200, and other types of unknown trafficking.
And you ask yourself why. I mean, prostitution's the oldest business in the world, as they say. Maybe it's not even prostitution itself. Maybe it's this eugenics culture in terms of life has become very cheap, especially in these authoritarian regimes. I mean, again, look at China. They prevented 400,000 births through abortion and family planning. But then when they have girls, well, Chinese society wants a boy because they want someone who can get a job and support them. Right. So the girls become practically worthless in the eyes of many in that society. And that's, you know, these are the kind of vulnerable people who get sucked into the sex trafficking, slavery aspects of things. And who's looking out for them because life has become so cheap?
Yeah, exactly. Like these eugenicists, these people who get on there and they brag and they say, we want to reduce the world population by X number of percent. They don't care if you're one of the people who lives through that. They don't care if you're a prostitute or you're a slave or you're whatever else. I mean, it's a huge problem. It goes way beyond trafficking. That's what we're talking about here today, but it goes way beyond trafficking.
But in Roman terms, the Super Bowl has really devolved into a grand orgy spectacle where the most elite of society get together for, again, this big mass ritual, and they just engage in all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the halftime shows, and I believe Melissa Melton's going to talk about this in a little bit, the halftime shows are just big Illuminati. Whether you believe in that or not, they're just big cultic symbolism. I mean, you can just look at the stuff, and I mean, she'll break it down better than I can, but it's so much symbolism, and it's not, you know, a nice family event anymore. Years past, you know, you could take your kids, and maybe you had enough money to take the neighbor kid down to the football game. You guys all have a good time, and now, I mean, the thing's it's so grandiose. I mean, and it's so absurd, just over the top. Even the halftime shows. I mean, I wouldn't want, if I had a daughter, I wouldn't want her to watch, you know, all the stuff that goes on there.
Yeah, it's just weird and inappropriate for a general audience. But I would also submit the whole deal with symbolism, it is what it is. You can read into the symbolism. There's different interpretations of the meaning. But mainly, it's a hidden language meant for those who have, as the Bible says, eyes to see, ears to hear. If you don't know what you're looking at, how is that affecting your subconscious? I mean, what if Madonna or Beyonce got on stage and started speaking Greek to an English-speaking audience or speaking Arabic? You would wonder what they're trying to say in a hidden, coded fashion. Why are they talking in a language that's not understood by people?
Exactly.
That's one of the ways we need to look at these hidden languages. But again, it's just, it becomes an excuse for people who are already decadent to go all out. And they did this in Roman society during what we know today as the Christmas time. Then it was Saturnalia festival. And in my view, it's very tied to satanic practices where they would just encourage this kind of running wild, running rampant, and just evolving more and more into this bread and circuses mentality. And again, you give up your right to control your own life, to control society, and to hold any of your leaders even remotely accountable when you give into this kind of behavior as a general society. I'm not judging anyone in particular for the things they're getting involved in.
Yeah.
But clearly this is abusive stuff. It's horrible to women, and we'd like to rein it in. It's such a hidden problem, though.
It is.
As you mentioned, it goes underreported.
It's the white slavery, as it's called, and it's not slavery of white people. It's this sex slavery. It's this this indentured servitude. This we own you kind of aspect, and it's way beyond the U.S. It's way beyond just women. I mean, there's children. I mean, to a much lower extent, even men get sucked into this, adult males, but, you know, surely large amounts of women. I actually have this next article here. Human trafficking to UK rising. And this says, last year, the authorities learned of 946 victims compared to 710 in 2010. The report said that 712 adult victims and 234 child victims were reported last year to the National Referral Mechanism. And I actually have this graph here. We get a shot of this, and you can see the countries where these people are coming from. You see Nigeria in the lead, Vietnam, Romania, and the list goes down from there. And it says that the top 10 countries account for 64% of all referrals.
And again, Nigeria, a country with a high birth rate. So they've told us in the eugenics mentality, those are worthless people. Don't worry about them. Who cares what happens to them? We just need less of them. That is a disgusting mentality. And Alex has talked about this. I don't have the articles in front of me because I wasn't prepared to talk about this. But DynCorp, the military contractor, got caught trafficking human slaves, sex slaves. The United Nations has been part of this. And the United Nations in Africa just lets these dictators slaughter their own people, encourages these factionalized wars, and disarms populations to keep them from being able to resist and institute kind of a normal society while they look the other way to these mass epidemics, the systematic abuse of sex, slavery, human trafficking, you name it. And in the case of DynCorp, they were caught, you know, as in the system knew about it. They were investigated. There were hearings in Congress even, but basically it was at most a slap on the wrist. They got some fines. The system looks the other way because they, at the top, the most elite people want to engage in this. They're blackmailed into going along with it, and it becomes epidemic with these illegitimate systems of government that have taken us over. Look at the climate change hearings, again, on behalf of the United Nations. They had them, I think the Copenhagen hearing, they had the largest influx at that time of known prostitutes, and of course there's an underbelly again to that.
Are we going to break?
We're going to break. We'll come back with your final thoughts, maybe take some more calls, and then coming ahead we've got David Ortiz, Melissa Melton, and more of our great reporters for the Infowars Nightly News. It's getting exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
We're going to be live tonight. Infowars Nightly News, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. David Knight going to be hosting. Stay tuned. Aaron Dykes sitting in for Alex Jones. We're back on the broadcast, Infowars.com. Of course, tonight, 7 p.m. Central, the Infowars Nightly News. Again, we're doing it live this week, and it's exciting. David Knight's going to do it tonight. I've done it the past 2 nights. Jakari Jackson, we're coming to the end of the hour. We've got other reporters coming in with different topics. But finish up on the dark side of the Super Bowl, the sex trafficking, slavery issue nobody wants to talk about.
Right. And it's not just a Super Bowl. I mean, it's all over. It's in various aspects of entertainment, not just sports. I mean, it's all over. And I mean, it's a big deal, and I don't want to limit it just to that. But in my closing remarks, I want to bring up some of these remarks that various officials have made concerning just things such as rape and trafficking and such as that. And I have this article right here. U.S. judge says victims' bodies can prevent rape. Yes, it is as absurd as he said it. A Southern California judge is being publicly admonished for saying rape victims didn't put up a fight during her assault The California Commission on Judicial Performance voted 10-0 to impose a public admonishment Thursday, saying Supreme Court Judge Derek Johnson's comments were inappropriate and a breach of judicial ethics.
Blame the victim mentality.
Yeah, that's what it is, and that's the same thing with these elitists, these globalists. You know, if you didn't, you're a sex slave because you didn't put up enough of a fight to get out of that. You know, and that's the mentality of many of these people. But I'll move quick to our next one. Richard Graham. UK lawmakers' rape remarks draw condemnation. A British lawmaker's suggestion that young women who wear high heels and short skirts put themselves at greater risk of rape has drawn widespread condemnation. If you are blind drunk, these are his words, if you are blind drunk and wearing those clothes, how able are you to get away? How are you able to get away? He said to a group of people, and my last one right here, corrupt judge exonerates 13 child sex slave traders and ignores 130 witnesses as liars. In an unprecedented case with hundreds of witnesses, a group of judges allowed 13 accused sex slave traders to walk and believe their testimony that the victims were liars. So that's the mentality. I mean, you go to the courts to get your justice. You have 130 witnesses, and now they're liars.
It's incredible.
You know, again, it's the same thing with, Sandusky. You know, they were reporting, I think so, I have an article for that they were reporting him as a pedophile. Yeah, here it is right here. Sandusky labeled likely pedophile in 1998 report. So they knew way back then that this guy was at least suspect. I mean, maybe they didn't have any concrete evidence, but going back to 1998, they had, reason to suspect this guy was up to something.
Yeah, and again, of course, everyone's entitled to their defense, but he's now been convicted. It's proven. But the first thing they did was try to discredit the witnesses and say that was a long time ago. You don't remember other reasons. They were supposedly their own fault for being caught up in this stuff.
Right.
When it was systematic, it was across the board. It was institutionalized there at Penn State, other places around the country.
Mm-hmm. And that's just the way these people operate.
It's really troubling stuff. You want to take a call here?
Sure.
Okay, we've got Paul in New Jersey. He wants to talk about guns. Thanks for holding.
Oh, guns and everything else. I mean, I'm just going to say a couple things. The UN. I mean, Al-Qaeda is a terrorist organization for the UN. NATO is the military arm of the UN, and we're paying for it all. And you pay your income tax, where does it go? It goes to the IMF, International Monetary Fund. So we're paying for our own destruction.
Isn't that the truth? I'd like to do a segment in the future on the IMF and how they hold these countries hostage. They give them loans, hold them on strings, and then they impose the kind of New World Order corporatist system they want. We're coming up to the end of the hour. Appreciate you, Jakari Jackson. We'll see you in the near future, see what you're working on. We got David Ortiz, Melissa Melton ahead. Infowars Nightly News tonight. Stay tuned. A lot of powerful information still ahead. We're back. This is the third hour. Again, I'm Aaron Dykes sitting in, but I'm joined by an array of Infowars Nightly news reporters, all doing great work, all upping their game, informing themselves, and taking it to the world so we can try to make a difference. Got a great crew working in the background, too. We had a quick turnaround here, getting people set into place. David Ortiz, you are at the helm now, so tell us what kind of things are on your mind. What have you seen in the news cycle here lately?
Well, there's a lot of good news going on as well, so I want to focus a little bit on some of the good news. And one of the good news is Senator Rand Paul is reintroducing his Audit the Fed bill. Obviously, last year, that passed overwhelmingly. It was Dr. Ron Paul's bill, and it passed in the House 327 to 98 overwhelmingly, and then it made its way to the Senate, and only 37 senators signed it, but it didn't make the floor. Had it made the floor, a lot more senators would have supported it. So just so you know, last year when it was introduced, Nancy Pelosi was quoted as saying, "I don't know that Congress and the public should be having a political impact on monetary policy. The central banks in all countries have these responsibilities. If the thought is we're politicizing monetary policy, I don't think that's a good idea."
And, of course, the Constitution authorizes Congress to control the currency, and it doesn't make sense for a private corporation, a private bank to issue and control the currency, especially when they're using it clearly to engage in economic warfare excuse me. But of course, Ron Paul and the others who joined him finally, after tireless decades of pushing for the issue, finally got just a partial, minuscule, puny, kind of on the surface audit of the Federal Reserve, and they found all kinds of misappropriations, giving billions to banks, giving billions to overseas foreign banks of taxpayer money, parking it at the Federal Reserve, giving them interest-free loans while allowing them to gain interest by just parking their money, not loaning it out to small businesses, not using it to revive America. Imagine how much more devastating information we'll find through a full audit. And again, this is an important time because this is the year 2013. Hard to believe. 100 years ago, 1913, is when they passed the act that created the Federal Reserve System, of course, in the dead of night on Christmas Eve, when most of the Congress had already been dismissed and went home for the holidays. They snuck it in, a sabotage against America, because they know that the power to issue currency is the power to destroy. Rothschild said he doesn't care who has an army, who has political force. Just let him. He doesn't care who makes the laws. Just let him manipulate the currency. David Ortiz.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have on record Bernanke saying, you know, we should print some more. They're almost at the end of their rope there, but he's willing to print some more, and they're devaluing our currency. I think inflation just over the last year has been about 10%. So the good news is that this bill is being reintroduced, and now 4 people who were in the House last year who supported this bill are now senators. So there's a much better chance. Obama has stated, President Obama, that he will not vote for it. But, you know, if this keeps on passing in both chambers, he's going to have a lot of egg on his face if he doesn't ultimately approve this. So even if it passes the Senate and the House this go around and Obama votes it down, he could only do that for so long before the American people decide, demand that he pass it. So let's wish Senator Rand Paul luck on that.
Yeah, even the worst of politicians can be politically shamed into going along with something that's actually good for people. I was just pulling up on Google Images the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar since 1774. That, of course, is right around the start of the American Revolution, the founding of the country. And you can see there were definitely ups and downs. There were spikes, but it remained relatively high. Then you come to the early 1900s. It's almost a straight graph down, 45-degree angle to where we are in the present day, less than 5% of the original value of the dollar. That will come up more ahead, but we need to talk more about the reauthorization of the Federal Reserve Charter, or rather the stopping of the Federal Reserve, we can hope. We'll have more on the other side. Stay tuned, maybe even some calls. This is the InfoWar, ladies and gentlemen. Engage your minds, open up to the larger reality, and start to take back your life. There's that old saying that the best revenge is living well. The best way, actually, to defeat this tyranny is to take back the power of your life into your own hands. I believe we need to decentralize the power that they've concentrated in Washington, D.C., the spheres of Wall Street, and the larger IMF, United Nations, Bank of International Settlements, World Bank system that they're erecting to spread worldwide tyranny. But if we just educate ourselves, tell others, of course, but change your own life, that's the best way we can do it. But of course, we're part of a nation, we're part of a country, and currency, again, we just blasted into it in the first short segment. Now we have a long segment. David Ortiz, one of our Infowars Nightly reporters here, currency is one of the most powerful mechanisms of control there is. There's political power, there's military power. People like Rothschild said they're not so concerned about that as long as they can control the currency. And we know that in the early days of colonial America leading up to 1776, they had what was known as colonial script. They issued their own currency, and they had a vivacious, lively economy there. And I think it was Ben Franklin who talked about how when they destroyed their ability to issue their own colonial script, that was the beginning of the end. That was perhaps the real trigger towards revolution. There were many factors: the taxation, the abuses of civil liberties and rights, the attempt to disarm the colonists. But one of the most important was that currency thing. And we're seeing these issues crop up again as people become educated about the Federal Reserve. And again, this is the 100-year anniversary of the tyrannical parasite, the Federal Reserve, who have changed our system of currency, moved it away from gold and silver, moved it away from a controlled based on the population fiat currency, which could work in theory, and just made it a weapon of all-out economic sabotage. David Ortiz, please get back into some of these issues.
Well, absolutely. I mean, as you were saying, you know, our currency is being devalued. I said earlier in the segment it's about 10% inflation annually, according to many independent studies. And it seems that many states are taking action as a result of this. Last year, 13 states presented bills to create their own currency, or to, at the very least, create a committee that would review the matter. And, you know, it moved further along depending on each state. Wyoming, I believe, either Wyoming or Washington, narrowly, it was voted down, but they almost created their own currency in one of those two states. But it seems now that lawmakers in Virginia say they want to keep their options open in case the value of the U.S. dollar ever collapses. So they're considering minting state coinage. A bill passed in their House in Virginia to create a committee to see if they will honor gold and silver as legal tender. So if it's already passed the Virginia House, if it goes to the Virginia Senate and passes, a committee will be created to see if they could use gold and silver as legal currency. And that's already being done in Utah.
And, of course, they're trying to convince us that using gold and silver is a new form of terrorism and it's going to undermine the economy. No, it's been the Federal Reserve debasing the value of our money and using it as an insider trading weapon where they can give, again, these zero-interest loans to the bankers on Wall Street, the big bankers, the Rothschild, Rockefeller factions, while the little people have to pay huge inflation, huge prices for their money. You know, if they get it on a credit card, it's upwards of 20–30% in many cases. But whereas many local cities do issue their own currency, they have coupon systems, and it's revitalized a lot of failing cities across the country, even in the modern day. So why not look at those kind of systems? I think it's encouraging that states like Virginia are looking at that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at last count, it was about 20 communities throughout the United States had their own currency. And it really helps the unemployed, low-income people, because now their currency has value, you know. So it's good to see that Virginia is doing this. Last year, 13 states reviewed this issue. Utah has passed a bill, as I stated earlier, to, you know, honor gold and silver. People are using it, so we wish the state of Virginia well.
Look, economic viability is one of our inherent rights. We have a right to our own lives and to try to prosper. I mean, that's basic to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And they want us to be economic slaves to this system, to be told what to do out of Washington and on Wall Street. And it's just so backwards. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we stated earlier about Rand Paul's audit the Fed bill that's being reintroduced. One of the reasons why the powers that be don't want that bill passed is because once a light is shined on the Federal Reserve, it will send international markets into a frenzy. It's not so much because, you know, they want to honor what the Federal Reserve does. They really want to cover for the Federal Reserve, you know. So, you know, it's good to see that states are taking action. Now, in other important news in terms of victories, because the Liberty Movement is also experiencing a lot of victories. In Washington State, they're preparing to take on the TSA. There's an article posted on Infowars.com where Representative Jason Overstreet is introducing a bill called HB 1454, and it basically says that if the TSA abuses their power, if they take a child away from a parent without the parent's consent and they frisk the child and the parent doesn't like that, they're going to rule it a Class C felony. Now, I don't know what a Class C felony is, but clearly there's going to be a penalty for it.
Well, even a Class B or Class A misdemeanor could be some pretty serious jail time.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's good to see that the state of Washington is really repudiating the TSA, and they're introducing a bill as well to really, you know, put the TSA on their toes.
But again, we've been conditioned since 9/11 and the war on terror to just accept these top-down controls when they're abusive and make no sense, but they want to engage us in a semantical debate. It's like I was talking with David Knight earlier about the drone situation and about torture. They want to argue over the definition of waterboarding versus torture. I mean, the stuff they do at a TSA checkpoint is a form of harassment and torture. I mean, why do they have to touch people's genitals into pants, harass old people and children especially. Notice they're the most vulnerable sectors of society on either end of the spectrum. Why do we have to be stopped and frisked and checked just to travel when we have a right to travel? And again and again, anytime there is an incident of terrorism, it just links back to the shadow government and to those in Washington who have an agenda for controlling us.
Absolutely. These agencies just continue to grow and grow. The TSA, it's about $8 billion a year agency. They have not caught one terrorist. It's not a good return on investment.
Tell them again.
$8 billion a year, the TSA agency. That's how much it costs the taxpayers. And they haven't caught one terrorist. It's not a very...
But you get a lot of lip from people in a uniform who think it makes them important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But, you know, it's good to see that, you know, people are wising up to this.
But, you know, I've only, since I've been here at Infowars, started to re-recognize states' rights and the importance of the 10th Amendment. But we've had a great awakening over several issues just in the last year or two, thanks to people like Drudge Report covering the TSA issue, thanks to states like Texas overwhelmingly, unanimously passing in the House that they wanted to try to throw out the TSA. But then again, we're told by the feds, you can't do that. We'll tell you what to do. We're the parent. We're the child. Obama is our daddy. Did you see that clip yesterday?
Yeah, when I thought about that, I just thought, you know, we should all just close our eyes and envision Obama picking us up and spinning us in a circle.
Oh, he could hug us like little children, like Joseph Stalin or Fidel Castro or all the other dictators around the world who pose for these poster images with children. Hitler went to many photo ops with children.
Yeah, it's not very loving. The NDAA is not very loving. Drone attacks are not very loving. A top-down approach is not very loving. But just speaking of Obama and the federal government, I was making this point earlier with another reporter that the economy, any revitalization that is taking place in the economy, Obama's getting credit for it, but in reality, it's because states are nullifying a lot of what he does. They're nullifying right to work. They're nullifying Obamacare. So he's actually getting credit for some of the improvements in the economy when, in fact, it's the states taking the matters into their own hand, abolishing state income taxes, things of that nature. And here you got Obama posing as the hero when, in fact, the states should be commended for the revitalization of the economy, the little revitalization.
Look at the biggest spike in sales of the whole year. It's in guns. That's because Obama's been trying to attack and rescind Second Amendment rights. It's because states have stood up and introduced Firearms Protections Act, because sheriffs have stood up and said no, and because the people have stood up and said, we see the value in self-defense and arming ourselves and having you not tell us what to do and control our lives. The TSA issue, again, $8 billion spent through federal tax money, sucked out of the people. Not one terrorist caught, lots of harassment of the people, but also it's been economically devastating. They admit tens of billions of dollars in travel money, in hotel money, in leisure spending is all drying up because people don't want to travel and put up with that harassment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They've had major industry reps meet with the TSA, Pistole, Napolitano, Chertoff, you name it, to say, can you please just back off? Can you please not now harass pilots after harassing regular passengers? Because we want people to travel. We're in bed with the travel industry. You know, we've got Travelocity packages with flights and hotels and rental cars. We want people to keep doing that and to have vacation time and money to spend. Can you stop harassing people and destroying a large sector of the economy?
Absolutely. And some airports, from what I understand now, do have the option to opt out and to have their own private, you know, security force. Sacramento just backed out. I don't know why.
They did that in Orlando, right?
Right.
And again, major tourist town, Disneyland's there.
Right. But what they don't say is that even if you get your own private security force to, you know, do security at airports, the TSA still oversees them.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, so, you know, it's good to see that, you know, that states are taking, you know, the initiative. But, yeah, the TSA is absolutely growing out of control. And speaking of states' rights, because we were talking about states' rights earlier, it seems that the gun issue, you know, many states are nullifying the assault weapons ban. But sadly, Maryland is, they look like they're going to pass an assault weapons ban. So, you know, the victory is really on the state level.
Well, that's why we have to be vigilant. We'll get more into this discussion on the other side. Other reporters, Melissa Melton coming up. Infowars Nightly News tonight. Stay tuned. Infowars.com. Let's educate ourselves and turn things around. Take back our lives. Come on, people. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about, of course, rights-based issues, TSA and the Fourth Amendment. guns and the Second Amendment, how they want an assault weapon ban. But it's also, as we discussed in the last segment, economic in every instance. Again, you look at the pattern of history repeating itself. Look back to the American Revolution. They talked about how they were eating out their substance. They had to fight back against the British because of these long train of abuses. Their rights were directly connected with their ability to conduct themselves in a viable way economically, and that's what drove them in many respects to fight for that. There were other agendas at work as well. But David Ortiz, you've been highlighting on a number of these issues. Now, we just mentioned at the last break there's an attempt at assault weapons ban in Maryland, but there's more.
Yeah, absolutely. In Maryland and in Colorado, it turns out that they're really having a heated debate in Maryland. Governor O'Malley, a Democrat, he's proposing a bill which would add Maryland to the 11 states that require residents to apply for and receive a license before purchasing a handgun. Now, he's targeting assault weapons as well, which I'll talk about in a second. But do you see how this is incremental? The argument was assault weapons, and now they're saying in Maryland they want a bill that says you're going to need a license to get a handgun. It's all incremental.
Well, they take one tragedy they could seize upon, one gun, the AR-15, they can exploit and play up, even though it's admitted the Sandy Hook shooter never used an AR-15. He supposedly had one in his car. Who knows if it was planted there? And yet they want to demonize all guns. And you were talking about how they want to hold gun manufacturers legally responsible for any damage done. Well, look at those hypocrites who conducted Fast and Furious. Will Eric Holder have to hold out a personal bond for the tens of thousands killed by drug cartels, armed by our own government, encouraged by the CIA to carry out a black ops war against the people? Will he be held liable for the damage to Border Patrol agent Brian Terry and the dozens of others who've been killed, the Mexican beauty queen, the upset to the economy in Mexico and in the United States?
Absolutely not. I mean, how it works is when a government official kills someone, it's collateral damage. When the American people kill someone, they need to be controlled. They're bad.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah. So, no. Yeah, Fast and Furious, it just goes on and on. All those children that were killed at a party in Mexico as a result of Fast and Furious.
Oh, but those children don't count because we're not supposed to talk about, we're supposed to talk about the Sandy Hook children.
Yeah, absolutely. Obama won't shed a tear for those Mexican children. So, yeah, when a government official kills someone, it's collateral damage. We shouldn't pay attention to that. But in terms of Colorado, you were talking about Colorado. Let me talk about Maryland real quick. Aside from purchasing a handgun and needing a license in the Maryland bill, his legislation in Maryland would also limit the magazine capacity from 20 to 10 rounds, and you need to pay a $100 fee as well. And Maryland Republicans have compared the bill's $100 fee and heightened training requirements to poll taxes imposed in many southern states during the Jim Crow era, which were often designed to discourage participation by poor black citizens. So more registration, and also if you're poor, you got to fork over $100 as well.
And they tried this under the original gun control in the United States in the 30s. That original gun control, they tried to make people pay registration fees. That was hundreds of dollars, and that was taken to the Supreme Court. A lot of it was struck back, but parts of it that weren't rescinded were based on that somehow they have the right to just tax us even against our own rights. We see the same thing with Obamacare as well, just by the way.
Yeah, and this works. These restrictions work. They sound reasonable, but very few people in New Jersey have a gun now. Very few people conceal carry because they got to pay a fee. They got to go through so much training. So this stuff actually works. So it does infringe upon our Second Amendment rights.
It works at disarming victims and letting criminals run wild.
Absolutely. While Dianne Feinstein, she carries a concealed carry. And you were also mentioning earlier Colorado. What they're going to do in Colorado is if they can't pass an assault weapons ban straight out, they're going to circumvent, and Colorado bill would hold gun makers and sellers accountable for weapon violence. If the bill becomes law, owners of semi-automatic rifles would face strict liability for civil damages caused by their types of weapons, while state statutes that safeguard manufacturers and dealers from such liability would be abolished. So basically, if you're a manufacturer and someone has your gun and there's a massacre, you're going to have to get liability insurance.
And none of this happens in a vacuum. We've seen these liberal journalists in various magazines. I don't want to misquote the magazine. I have one in mind. But they wrote about how you should have a license to get a gun, how you should have to take out personal insurance if you're going to own a weapon. And they say, well, we should rewrite the Constitution. We should rewrite the bill. The Second Amendment. We should say, oh, you do have a right to a weapon unless Congress or the president decides otherwise. That's not a right. That is tyranny. That's arbitrary power. And it's turning our rights into a privilege. Thank you, David Ortiz. We'll hear more from you in your special reports days to come. Melissa Melton coming up. We'll get into the Illuminati symbolism. Infowars.com. Infowars Nightly News tonight, 7 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the InfoWar. We must awaken our minds, educate ourselves, and again, take back our lives. We were touching on so many topics earlier with David Ortiz, and I mentioned how they're eating out our substance. They really are. Now, on the backs of all the stuff we've heard about genetically modified foods, its linkage to organ damage, tumors, cancer, and especially digestive issues. We have the story up at Infowars.com. Safety group blows lid on secret virus hidden in GMO crops, and it just is further evidence that this stuff is inducing gene mutations and really just wrecking all species up and down the food chain. At the same time, we have this news out of the New American. The GMO giant Monsanto joins Big Business Coalition for United Nations 21. Well, of course, Agenda 21 was always about using so-called seed technology to feed a hungry world, when at the same time it's really about centralized control and eating out your substance. Look at what they did in Iraq. It wasn't just a war against the people. It wasn't just a war for territory. Remember the 100 orders from Iraq that Paul Bremer, not to be confused with John Brennan, introduced? One of them had to do with GMO seeds. They took over all the seeds and mandated that only Monsanto and other biotech seeds could be planted. Oh, but after a year or more of pushing for Prop 37, people demanding to know what's in their food so they can avoid GMOs, pushing for labeling laws, they are moving with this false solution. You've got the big agri-industry and the GMO industry now pushing for their own federal compromise on GMO labeling that they say could trump state law forever. You've got representatives of Walmart, General Mills, Pepsi, Frito-Lay, Mars, Coca-Cola, and others meeting with the FDA on January 11th for mandatory federal GMO labeling. And they say this is the concept of preemption. They want to preempt what states and local areas can do so that they can create their own loopholes, continue to do business as they like to operate, while giving the public some assurance that something's being done about these very dangerous, very devastating GMO technologies. Now I'm going to shift gears completely into another subject. We're joined by our reporter, Melissa Melton. She did this special report on the Super Bowl and the Illuminati messages displayed during that weird Pinnacle halftime ritual show. Let's go to that piece right now.
I'm Melissa Melton reporting for Infowars Nightly News. The day after the Super Bowl, the top story on Yahoo.com was, did Beyonce flash an Illuminati sign? Next to a picture of Beyonce making a pyramid hand symbol, the article goes on to say, according to legend, the Illuminati are a tiny super secret cabal of influential individuals who have shaped the course of world events. So it makes perfect sense that Beyonce would flash their triangle sign to one of the largest viewing audiences in human history. What better way to preserve a secret? That's a definite possibility. Founded by Bavarian professor of law Adam Weishaupt in 1776, the Illuminati is considered the most notorious secret society, a sect bent on manipulating reality and dominating through a world government. These so-called illuminated ones have been referred to by some as Satan's elite, whom they worship. Their symbol is a pyramid to illustrate the idea of a top-down societal control system, and the pyramid features an all-seeing eye, or the Eye of Lucifer. Infowars has reported extensively on the history of the Illuminati, their birthplace, their prevalence in popular culture, music, movies, and their intent to dominate the world. While the article's language seems to sarcastically play off Beyonce's hand gesture as no big deal, This isn't the first time we've seen questionable symbolism at the Super Bowl.
Look at these screenshots we've got from last night's Super Bowl performance by Madonna, and then you can also Google image search for yourself and type in Baphomet. And of course we see that Madonna is dressed up as Baphomet. She's sitting on the throne of Baphomet. She's got the horns. Later on, she's got the hand gestures of Baphomet. And this is the idol that the American people during Super Bowl halftime show are being told to worship. So who's Baphomet? Baphomet is an idol used by Satanists to represent the devil.
This also isn't the first time we've seen questionable symbolism from Beyonce. The pagan deity Baphomet, a figure revived in the 19th century as an idol for Satan worship, has been prominently featured in her videos and album artwork, and she even wears a Baphomet ring. And Beyonce isn't the only music star by far who's been called out for having hidden symbolism in her videos. The Yahoo article claims that Beyonce is merely supporting her husband's record label, but if this symbol is a diamond and not a pyramid, why are he, Beyonce, and other stars seen looking through it with one eye? In addition, let's analyze this shirt sold under Jay-Z's clothing label. It again depicts the pyramid hand symbol with the all-seeing eye atop it, and 13 rays of light coming out of the sides, encircled by a serpent and other smaller symbols with the tagline, Masters of the Craft, at the bottom. Jay-Z has also had some interesting critiques of hidden messages in his music as well.
Jay-Z, H to the Izzo, V to the Izzy, Jehovah God, that's what he calls himself. We just happen to come across a very disturbing song by Brother Jay-Z, and has a backwards message in it, and we had to reverse the song and play the song backwards.
Tricks, 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 murder, murder, Jesus, tricks, tricks, tricks.
And the rapper has gone on record wondering why people have linked him to devil worship and the Illuminati. When asked by radio personality Angie Martinez if these rumors of deliberately adding images to his videos were true, Jay-Z responded, "No, never done that before. Why would I do that? That's retarded." But here's a clip of another interview where Jay-Z actually admits he hides messages in his music.
And then I start doing, these different, hidden messages in the music, just as that replaced, the technical aspect of it. And then it's just, evolved from there.
The Super Bowl aside, we've seen other curious eye symbolism at major events. At the one-year anniversary of 9/11, the band marched out onto Ground Zero in what appeared to be an all-seeing eye formation. Are all of these mere coincidences? Many people ask, if the Illuminati is such a super-secret cabal and they're so devious, why are they openly hiding their symbols in plain sight? In his book Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare, Michael Hoffman II calls this revelation of the method, or advertising one's power openly to amplify it, gloating and flaunting the idea that resistance is futile before an unsuspecting public. Are all of these established Illuminati symbols supposed to acclimate people subconsciously to a darker agenda, or are we really supposed to believe that all-seeing eyes and pyramids and Baphomet costumes are going to be the new theme for the Super Bowl every year? And what is the average person supposed to think about this continuous symbolism inundation? Or is the truth that they're not supposed to think at all, but just go along with their regularly scheduled programming? I mean, how many coincidences can you have before it's not a coincidence anymore? These are overt messages of elite domination by a covert group parading a pageant of mass conditioning before the public in a culture dominated by television at a sporting event watched by millions every year. And many do not even realize what's happening. If it doesn't mean anything, why is it there? For Infowars Nightly News, I'm Melissa Melton.
And so again, that's a recap of, yet again, these strange occurrences happening at the halftime show at the Super Bowl. Madonna did her strange ritual last year. Beyonce blinged all these messages. And really, there should be no denial. They're clearly demonstrating Illuminati, Masonic, other occultic symbols. But the point is, why? Why would they do it if the public doesn't know what's going on? Well, they rule the public by demonstrating their dominance over them, by putting suggestive subliminal messages into our daily lives. Is it really going on? Well, ask yourself politically how we came to work against our own interests, to turn over the power of our own lives to these politicians who give us phony pretexts, 9/11, the war on terror, phony WMD exploits, to take over our constitutional bounds and run over us. Meanwhile, we've submitted to this consumer culture. We've learned to believe in and buy in these celebrities. We watch these commercials where we relate to the little short messages they give us. And why not demonstrate some of the hardcore control symbols that they put into us? People don't know how to read anymore. You've got to remember, literacy has been an ongoing tens of thousands of years struggles. In old times, it was only kings and priest class who could read at all or afford books because they had to be transcribed by hand. The rise of the printing press changed that to a large extent, and many revolutionary tendencies were built on that principle. The whole Age of Enlightenment, the American Revolution, was on the backs of the printing press and people learning to read. You've got the regular text, that's the words, the things as you see them, but there's also subtext, the things between the lines, the things they're not saying, and there's also the context. What is surrounding it? What other events are happening at the time? That's the kind of analyzation we need to use. My literature teacher was actually pretty good in public schools, taught us how to read between the lines and see what authors and other things were really meaning. We analyzed 1984, and it's really played a big role in my awakening and one of the reasons I'm here. And so with that in mind, let's look at the Super Bowl. Melissa Melton, you joined us. You analyzed these things, why they display these ritualistic like symbols during the Super Bowl, during this mass event where everyone tunes into television, everyone watches this one performance.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have come out since I did this report, and they've actually said that if it's just Jay-Z's record label, that's just his symbol for his record label, and we're making a big deal out of nothing. However, why would you pick something that's been historically linked to devil worship and the Illuminati? It's been around for a very long time. That's like if I went and got a record label and I decided to make the swastika my symbol and then got offended when people linked it to Nazis, you know? And I said, well, that's just a weird X. I don't know why you're thinking that about me. I mean, it's ridiculous. And actually, in analyzing it even further, we found the Pepsi commercial that they showed beforehand, the little intro into the Super Bowl, had some subliminal messages in it.
I didn't see it, but tell us what's in it.
We got a clip. Actually, we're going to play a clip.
Do we have that, guys?
So, right here. This was shown for maybe half a second.
And again, prisonplanet.tv viewers can see what's going on, but they're showing the Pepsi can. They're flashing through hundreds of people. They're showing sneakers. It's all very fast motion. And oh, there's devil horns
Girl
just in there,
devil horn sticking
just for a second, half a second.
And then the very next image after that is an eyeball, just gigantic eyeball right there, all-seeing eye right there. I mean, why would they have that? Why do they need to have a girl flashing devil horns hidden in there, basically? I mean, you have to really slow it down to even notice that it's there.
Well, you've got a whole history of Masonry, of the Illuminati, in relation to the power structure. People who want power or are at the pinnacle of power are brought into these societies. That's how they are given higher office. And then you've got the whole celebrity culture, Hollywood, who's learned to read these messages, learn that they're supposed to interject them in for the masses without the masses necessarily understanding what they're seeing, but they convey, especially the pyramid with the all-seeing eye, they convey top-down control that the masses are supposed to submit. And does it have an effect? Well, we see it every day in music videos and commercials. It's just that the Super Bowl is extra on display because it's a primary moment.
People.
104 million viewers.
They're saying watched Beyonce's, 112 Madonna's, million people.
Yeah, Madonna. Okay, so I made the case on the nightly news the other night after they aired your report that it was the secret symbolism, hidden messages for top-down control. But could it really be considered a ritual? Is there really something satanic or hidden going on here? Well, let's hear what Madonna herself had to say about her Super Bowl performance last year.
Do you guys nervous about doing the Super Bowl? Oh my God, I'm so nervous. You have no idea. I am.
Really?
First of all, it's the Super Bowl. I mean, the Super Bowl is kind of like the Holy of Holies in America, right? So, like, here I am. I'm going to come into the halfway between, like, the church experience, and I'm going to have to deliver a sermon that's going to have to be very impactful.
So there again, I might even play that clip one more time just so we make sure the listeners are analyzing the words she's using. She sacrilegiously says the Super Bowl is like a holy of holies, says it's like a church event, and that she's going to give the sermon. And then you look, this was before the Super Bowl, look at what she did in her, quote, sermon at the Super Bowl. She displayed Baphomet. She did all these weird ritualistic things. Could it really be a ritual? Well, for her, it's a church. Let's play it one more time.
Are you nervous about doing the Super Bowl?
Oh my God, I'm so nervous. You have no idea. I am.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's the Super Bowl. I mean, the Super Bowl is kind of like the Holy of Holies in America, right? So, like, here I am. I'm going to come into the halfway between, like, the church experience, and I'm going to have to deliver a sermon. It's going to have to be very impactful.
She's going to deliver a sermon.
Her Baphomet ritual was a sermon.
Exactly. And so if it doesn't matter, it doesn't necessarily matter if the people believe it or not. She obviously does.
And she's admittedly into Kabbalah and all kinds of other secret society
Gnosticism.
stuff. A lot of these people in entertainment are, and she's been propped up for decades as a major cultural icon. Everybody loves or hates her, but they know who she is.
Yeah, well, and so you've got this being paraded around in front of people, and even this year, it was more subtle this year, but there was still a lot of symbolism and bizarre things throughout Beyonce's performance. And then we also have a clip of people in the crowd mirroring her symbols back to her and making devil horns and making triangle, pyramid things. And so it has an effect, obviously. Obviously it does. Obviously it's brainwashing people whether they realize it is or not.
And whether these things are ultimately meaningful or not is yours to discover and decide, but it's in all the mass media we're watching every day. People, you really shouldn't be watching television more than maybe a couple minutes to catch maybe a major news story. It's not just entertainment. It is, quote, programming, and they really have changed our society with it. They've shown it contributes to declining sperm counts. It contributes to this people in an alpha state who lose touch with their regular consciousness, follow the leader, do what they're told, and really aren't engaged in society. It's destructive in so many forms, and there's just so much of the symbolism going on. Your comments, take us out to break, and we'll come back with a little bit more.
Well, obviously, Yahoo.com had that as their main top story for the day. Did Beyonce flash an Illuminati sign? So, and the reason is so many people came out and said that she did. Obviously, they think it's an issue enough to make it the main top story for the day. So if it doesn't mean anything, why is it there?
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. It's just hundreds, if not thousands of years of these symbols being manifest, always by top-down societies, people who want control. It's fascinating. Again, Madonna admitted for her it was a sermon. Satanic ritual. We'll be back. This is the Info War. Our hour is coming to an end, but the battle never ends. We must awaken our minds, understand what the fight is, and take a position, dig in. Only with that can we turn things around. That's how we affect our universe. Now, the show's going to end, go to rebroadcast in just a moment, but tonight, live Infowars Nightly News with David Knight. We've been doing it live the past 2 nights, just kind of as an experiment, but it's very energizing, very exciting to do it that way. Anyway, we go back to Melissa Melton with more of the symbolism we saw on display, on exhibit at the Super Bowl.
Well, I mean, she's dancing around inside of a red circle that looks like an eye. She's dancing around in a ring of flames. She's flashing these pyramid symbols. I mean, nothing about that seems wholesome or good. I mean, and then you've got the lights going out. That was another issue that people brought up. I didn't have time to cover everything in a small special report, but the lights did go out about 10 minutes after her performance, I think it was. And they stayed out for 33 minutes and some seconds. And say what you want, but 33 is the highest known degree of Freemasonry. And we know it's on record that Adam Weishaupt, who founded the Illuminati, did infiltrate the Masons. And so I actually have a quote here that I think is pretty interesting about that. by writer Peter Farley. He says, Masonry never works in the full light of day. Everyone knows of its existence, its meeting places, and of many of its adepts, but one is ignorant of its real aims, its real means, its real leaders. The immense majority of Masons themselves are in that position. They are only the blind machinery of the sect which they serve. Many honest Masons are so blind that they would be stupefied if they knew for what they are being used.
Yeah,
so,
and so they talk about how Masonry is not all bad. A lot of its membership are well-meaning, but again, it's a secret society with hierarchical ranking, and just like the military or just like in the White House, it's on a need-to-know basis. So you've got a lot of people blindly in that system, assuming it's doing good work, they do charity, etc., not knowing what's really going on. And you mentioned Adam Weishaupt. I've read books on this. I went to the founding place of the Illuminati over in Germany, and Weishaupt took his Illuminati Society. They infiltrated the ranks of Masonry, took over many of the lodges, and got their ranks instituted in there. And John Bound was showing me behind the scenes, the old all-seeing eye pyramid logo used to have the fairly innocent slogan, De Favente Perennis, which translates to with God's favor. But over the years,
the ages.
But now it's Novus Seclorum Ordum, New Order of the Ages. Excuse me, I said it wrong. Novus Ordo Seclorum, New Order of the Ages, New World Order. And you see that with people like Francis Bacon and more. But let's get back to the Super Bowl and what kind of stuff they had on display.
Well, actually, we just found this out, too. There was actually an ad during the Super Bowl for Mercedes-Benz where Willem Dafoe actually plays the devil, and a young man has made a deal, offered a deal with the devil where he can receive a new Mercedes-Benz.
You get a cool car, you just have to sell your soul.
You just have to sell your soul. And they actually have him signing a contract at the end, but it flashes to a ring that he's wearing, that Willem Dafoe is wearing, that has a Mason symbol on it, Freemason symbol. So it's... And
these commercials, I didn't see it, but these don't happen by accidents. They spend millions of dollars producing them, and millions upon millions for that prime airtime when there's maximum viewers.
$4 million for 30 seconds this year.
Wow,
So
more than ever, so.
Every single thing they put in one of these commercials is meaningful. If you're going to spend $4 million on 30 seconds, every second...
This isn't stuff slipping by.
No, it's not an accident that this is in there. That we have... It says there's a satanic spirit in here. I'm looking at this breakdown. I mean, I just received this a minute ago. There's an all-seeing eye at the end, too. Once again, more eye symbolism. And actually, eye symbolism's been around in the Super Bowl halftime show even before Madonna. I have a clip in there of the Black Eyed Peas, an image of that. It's all these people raising their hands up in a circled in an eye.
It's creepy stuff. It's all on display. You know, blogs like Vigilant Citizen break down a lot of the behind the scenes, what these symbols mean. But you could do it for yourself just by learning to read text, subtext, and context. Tonight, Infowars Nightly News live with David Knight, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. Tune in, spread the word, get people watching. Let's turn things around.